Hi, I'm Jordan Dietz with FCA here in San Diego. And our great verse for today is Jeremiah 24:7, which reads, I will give them a heart to know me, that I am the Lord. They will be my people, and I will be their God. For they will return to me with all their heart. And I think it's easy when we read a passage like this to immediately get the warm fuzzies that come with encouraging scriptures and think, man, this is so cool. God's going to have a heart to know me, that he's my Lord. I will be his people, and he will be our God, and we will return to him with all of our hearts. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily. I think there are so many verses throughout scripture that can give us a quick shot or jolt of encouragement. But I think it's also important to know the context of what's being shared here. And Jeremiah 24 is a very short chapter, and it has to do with a vision that God gives to Jeremiah of 2 baskets of figs. One basket is a very good basket of ripe, plump, juicy figs, and the other basket is a rotten basket with figs that need to be discarded and that can't be eaten. And as you dig through the story, you find out that, in fact, the good figs in the good basket are actually the Israelites who were taken into captivity first by King Nebuchadnezzar back to Babylon. And there was a large number of people that were still left behind after this first invasion of Jerusalem. And at the time, the people who had stayed behind thought that they were the better ones, that they had somehow survived God's judgment, and those who were being taken to Babylon were clearly the ones who, needed a correction or were no longer in God's favor. But as you dig into the story a little bit more, you find out that, in fact, there were some amazing people who were honoring God and following him with their hearts, who were actually removed from Babylon through God's grace. The prophet Ezekiel is one of those. And then some of the most important figures in scripture, Daniel and his buddies Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were part of that first group taken into captivity. And they end up honoring God and creating some of the most memorable passages in scriptures that encourage us today as a result of being taken away. And in fact, the Israelites who were left behind, King Zedekiah, and some of the others, had this prideful heart about not being taken. And as it turns out, they end up being the ones who get the worst of it, who are taken away in a terrible place and never brought back. And if you look in verse 6, it's very encouraging because it's speaking to the same good basket. And it says, I will bring them back to this land. I will build them up and not tear them down. I will plant them and not uproot them. And so you see that this first group, who seemingly were the ones that we initially judge as the worst ones, were actually the ones that God was setting aside for his favor. And I think it's a good lesson for us to learn in terms of our daily lives and circumstances and the things that we see happening around us. You see, I get to work with a lot of youth with FCA, young athletes and ambitious coaches. And one thing that you hear a lot about the young people today is, oh man, this next generation's just terrible, and they're going to hell in a handbasket, and they're going to drive us right off a cliff. And there is some truth to this younger generation being different than what we're used to, and doing some things that maybe we wouldn't be proud of. But I can tell you guys firsthand from experience on campus and with these kids that there is a remnant, there is a special group that God has set aside that's going to do his work and is going to glorify him. And we just need to be careful that we don't do blanket judgments on people or situations. And this can be across the board for all sorts of different things. I'm incredibly guilty of this myself, of judging things before really being patient and letting God's story play out and seeing what he wants to do. So that's my encouragement to you. Understand that God has a story for you and the things happening around you that may be different than what you're experiencing or what you expect. And sometimes he can surprise you, and that's not a bad thing. So I hope you stay encouraged and have a great day.